It finally happened. Nintendo just announced their new model Switch, the Switch OLED, and the reactions on the internet are salt. A lot of salt. I have been waiting so long for Nintendo to do some kind of official announcement about this because the rumor mill has just been going on and on and on. I'm so glad we actually have official word finally. Generally, Nintendo stuff is really what we focus on here. Though I did do a Sony video recently. If you want to go check out, I did a controller mod with Mystic for a DualSense. Adds a back button. Super cool. Make sure to check it out. But let's talk about the Switch OLED. Look, if I'm gonna be honest, I'm actually not that angry about this, but I can see where some people are coming from, so let's walk through the features a little bit and just talk about my thoughts on it. First, before we talk about anything else, I just wanna get out of the way real quick. One thing that I am so happy they have finally addressed is the kickstand. I have hated the Switch's kickstand since day one. Yes, it is not exactly the core feature that absolutely matters, but that thing always broke off. I never used tabletop mode at all. And so finally having a new design that spans the whole body of the Switch, it's adjustable. It looks like it's not gonna actually snap off because, you know, it's more than just a tiny piece of plastic. I'm happy about that. Let's talk about everything else now. As the name Switch OLED suggests, the really big change here is one of the big rumors that was going around a couple months back from Bloomberg, that they have in fact included an OLED screen that is 7 inches, filling the main body of the Switch rather than having those big bezels that we saw before. This does not change the physical form of the Switch itself. It looks like it is the same dimensions as the current model. The screen is just noticeably bigger and looks better because it's OLED, as opposed to the LCD panel found on current Switch models. And this really is the main key feature of this release. There are some other upgrades we're going to talk about, some that are cool, some that are fine, but this really is the big selling point of this new model, which is disappointing to some people because while an OLED screen is very cool, and honestly, I'm personally very excited about it, a lot of people were of course hoping that a new model Switch, the Switch Pro, would be some kind of hardware upgrade, which this is not. It is using the same internal parts as the regular Switch, same CPU, same amount of RAM. There is a storage bump, but obviously that does not impact actual gameplay performance. It just means you have a little more space to work with before you have to buy an SD card to expand the storage. So if it's not a performance boost, what does it offer aside from the OLED screen? Well, the look is redesigned a little bit. It does have a new dock that features more kind of curved edges. There are some slight design changes to the dock as well, where it now features a built-in Ethernet port rather than having you rely on using a USB adapter. Of course, we already talked about the redesigned kickstand and the increased storage. Previously, Switch models were 32, now it's 64. Still not really enough in my opinion. If you're buying a lot of games, you're gonna need to upgrade the space eventually, but if you're primarily focused on physical titles, you might be able to get away with just the internal storage if you're never buying DLC or anything. And they've upgraded the speakers on the Switch, which honestly, they haven't really gone into any kind of in-depth about this. It's basically just better speakers. So how that actually pans out, we're gonna have to wait till we actually get our hands on it to see how it compares to the regular Switch models. One thing that wasn't directly talked about in their main announcement, but has been addressed by Nintendo on some support pages, is battery life. The Switch OLED has the same size battery as the current Switch models, and the battery life of that is affected a little bit by the switch over to an OLED screen, but ultimately, at least according to Nintendo, it basically shakes out to being the same as the current mainline Switch option. The reason why OLED would impact battery life, at least for some specific cases, is because since OLED relies on lighting individual parts of the screen instead of backlighting the whole thing all the time, some games should actually use less battery than they would on a traditional Switch. Given Nintendo's mainline franchises tend to be very focused on bright and poppy colors, not gonna save a whole lot of battery life on those. But for some darker titles, you might see a little bit better battery life thanks to the OLED screen compared to a regular one. But again, as far as Nintendo's concerned, it mostly shakes out to being about the same battery life range. Release info-wise, the system is coming out on October 8th, so it is this year. And price-wise, it is a little more expensive than a regular model, going for $350 due to the fact that the OLED does up the price of parts a bit. So, with all that out of the way, how do I personally feel about the Switch OLED? There's a lot of mixed reactions out there right now, mostly negative, mostly in the form of a lot of salt. And me personally, actually, I kind of think it's cool. Look, Part of the reason why there's a lot of negative reaction right now is because the constant rumor mill that has existed for the past couple years has really driven up a lot of expectations of what a new model could or could not have. And all of them are mostly focused on the concept of a new model being some kind of 0.5 generation spec bump, which this is not. This is an incremental re-release that offers a slightly larger screen. It's more like a 3DS XL than it is a new 3DS. And there's a lot of stuff that people were hoping to see that is not here. 4K DLSS was of course a very popular rumor. Some people were hoping for a resolution bump on the screen. There was talk of maybe adding Bluetooth audio support. People wanting additional special features like VRR. None of that's happening here. It's ultimately, primarily, just the screen boost. And personally, that's kind of enough for me, to be honest. Look, I think stuff like increasing the resolution stuff is cool, but at the end of the day, especially when I primarily play handheld, the OLED screen is going to look a lot better than the current screens do, and better speakers, while I don't necessarily have a one-to-one comparison right now of how much better they are, that sounds like a good deal to me. That is something that I'm excited to experience. As far as the spec bump stuff goes, while I don't really care about necessarily getting resolution bump stuff, one thing I will agree with is that I am a little sad it doesn't have just a light, modest bump for the sake of evening out the performance on some games that are currently struggling. For instance, while it was not internally developed as a first-party game, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity has some major performance issues on the current model Switch, and so the fact that we're getting a new model that's going to re-experience those same things, it is a little bit of a letdown. You know, what's really weird about this announcement in general is the fact that really this feels more like it's competing against the Switch Lite than it is the regular mainline Switch. Because if you are a primarily docked gameplay person, this doesn't really add anything. You get a built-in Ethernet port and a little more internal storage to work with. Not exactly something you want to upgrade for. Handheld people though, especially if you have a Switch Lite and you've decided, you know what, maybe I do want docked. Maybe the screen's a little too small. Oh, OLED, that sounds nice. There's a lot of stuff that for people who primarily play handheld where this is something that sounds a lot more attractive. And if I'm to be perfectly honest with you, look, I'm gonna buy this new model right away because of what I do, this channel. But if I wasn't doing this, if I wasn't reviewing products like that, generally I'm actually pretty stubborn when it comes to incremental upgrade type stuff like this. So, you know, I honestly probably wouldn't have bought this on launch day. The OLED screen sounds awesome, but on its own, to me at least, it doesn't seem like it's worth dropping a whole another $350 to grab that if I already have a working Switch. Now, if there was a cool looking special edition, that might change my mind, but this definitely is one of the situations where I think the general aim here more so is, hey, if you don't have a Switch yet, here's the newest, coolest model that you should pick up, but if you already have a Switch, some people are going to upgrade for the sake of that OLED, but I don't think that's going to be a super major move. Maybe from Switch Lite, but not from regular Switch. And really, more than anything out of this, I'm kind of happy that the announcement just finally happened. In typical Nintendo fashion, it was a shadow drop, but I'm just glad that the rumor cycle for now is at least a little calmed down. Except not really. I'm already seeing people on Twitter and other places immediately talking about how, well, oh, they're revealing this one, but maybe there's another one down the line soon. Maybe there's going to be another upgrade. Honestly, I don't know. I do think an actual spec bump model sometime down the line is a possibility. Whether that is a 0.5 release like they did with the new 3DS, or maybe it's just a brand new generation leap at some point. I think something that's a very important lesson to take away with all of this is that the constant rumor cycle has been so tiring with this model that a lot of the reaction to it has been heavily shaped by what people perceived as what we were likely to get, and we didn't. And this is something that I am also definitely a bit guilty of. I mean, I try to keep expectations in check whenever I can, and every time there's a major rumor cycle, I talk about, hey, take this with a grain of salt, because this is just according to some guy who heard it from some other guy. But the thing is, when more and more people repeat that again and again and again, these expectations get built up for the kind of reaction that we are now seeing. So is there going to be another model after this? Yeah, someday maybe. But that's going to be a whole other rumor mill that's probably going to start up in another, I don't know, 3 months, maybe as soon as right now. But for the time being, I'm just going to enjoy this new model when it comes out.